everyone, my name is Jenna, but you guys can call me Jen. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. Hi, hello. Today is gonna be a very chatty video, so get ready, buckle in. I have no idea how long this is gonna be. It could be anywhere from like 20 minutes to 50. Like at this point, we know that I yap. I just yap, okay? And that is how it's gonna be today, because today we are going over every single different story idea I have in my noggin. Okay, so if you did not know, hi, I'm Jen. I'm a content creator. As you can see, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, all that kind of stuff. I have a cat currently playing with a spring, so if you hear any scratching noises, that's what that is. Freya's having a great time. But I am also an author, a published author, self-published author, currently hoping to be a traditionally published author one day. And I have 4 books out. Let me introduce you to them. We'll take Lockdown for some support because he is my boy. I am a author of a finished standalone trilogy, the Airmount books. Those books are just gonna hang out sideways, but I decided to go down the publishing route with some cozy fantasies back when I read Legends and Lattes, because of course that inspired the hell out of me, and I started with a second story, and then I went into A Little Luck. These two came out in the same year, both in 2023. I don't know what I was on. I was crazy. And then this came out in 2025, A Favored Fae, the final one in this lovely Airmount Books trilogy. So these are cozy fantasies, and I do have cozy ideas as well on top of this, but from here on, my plan is to go a little bit more traditional epic fantasy and also a little dystopian. Put a pin in that. I will talk about it a little later. These are out. You can get them literally anywhere right now. On top of that, I also have a random romance novella that I published as well that I would like to also beef up this collection as well under this pen name. It's not really, like, it is a pen name because it's not my legal name, but it is my name. Like, you just add an A onto Jen and you have Jenna, and that is my name, Jenna Collignan. Jen Collignan just sounds better as a romance author name, so that's why I've named myself Jen Collignan for my romance books. This I originally wrote because Kobo was hosting a contest for their Kobo original holiday books back in 2024. I noticed it in June when they announced that contest, and I was like, that could be fun to challenge myself to write a novella in like a really short amount of time, between 15 and 20,000 words. So I did. I became one of the top 11 finalists. I did not win, which is totally fine, because then I got to be able to publish this myself everywhere and then have a physical copy, not just in Kobo's ebook type situation. I got to do this, and I got to also get an audiobook of it narrated by N.D. Louise, my very first audiobook, which was really fun. So fun, Canadian, sapphic, amazing. But yeah, all my books are very queer. Just a heads up, because your girl is queer. So those are the 4 books that I have out currently. We're gonna briefly talk about the romance stuff, and then we're gonna dive headlong into the fantasy of it all. So for that romance idea, I have at least one more in my head for another like little romance novella situation. I also have a full like romance book idea that is inspired by something that my therapist told me. She basically put the idea in my head to write something like this. So, but first, the little novella to go alongside Merry and Bright, I would love to write a Halloween one called Trick or Treat. The same, like, you know, 2-word situation. They go together in this same small town, that kind of a thing. Probably have a cameo from these two. It would be Halloween-y. It would be set, I haven't really thought about this in a long time, and I don't remember a lot of the details that I thought up originally, but it would be set like during the month of October, very short timeline, because I think novellas work best on a very short timeline. And so it would be short timeline and also right around Halloween with some sexy sapphic-y vibes again, I do believe. Or maybe not even sapphic, it would be, I think the idea that I had in my head, the couple that popped into my head was femme and then non-binary. So who's to say what happens with that one? But that's one of the romances I have in my head. And then the romance that my therapist got into my head was that because I have had literally no luck in dating in my entire life, 28, and has been single for 20 fucking years, my therapist was like, well, why don't you write your happy ending? Like, why don't you write it down? Like, write a story about this. I thought that was a really interesting idea, to take inspiration from my lack of dating, but not for my lack of trying to date, you know, like write a modern 28-year-old woman on the dating apps type of story and then write a happy ending for it, obviously to like, not necessarily manifest one for me, but like low key. And I have many ideas in my head for it. It could be something along the lines of like in character, like I would obviously fictionalize the fuck out of it don't worry, it wouldn't be a direct echo of my life. But I was thinking about like, this girl is just her woes about being on the dating apps, all this kind of stuff. Very real, very raw, not necessarily like rom-com, but definitely romance, but also a little funny in some ways, but not like leaning fully rom-com. Like I think there would be some heavier stuff in there and that kind of a thing, like dealing with like mental illness and neurodivergency and all that kind of stuff. But I would also like to kind of set up the dating as like, she decides one day to just take... Freya is having way too much fun with that spraying. I do apologize if you can hear that in the background. But the main character would decide one day to like take her dating into her hands and then go on like a spree of like dates that her friends set up, that she sets up herself on dating apps, like just trying to get herself out there, meet more people actually in real life, and all this kind of stuff. It would also be like, at the same time, she meets her friend's husband's best friend, who was their like best man situation, and she was the maid of honor situation, at like that kind of a thing, but then like nothing really happens of it. Like I want to play with a little bit of like, sometimes you just meet people naturally and you don't necessarily know that they're going to be your person, that kind of a thing. So like I want to play a little bit with that. It's very, very not in any form in my head, but I have ideas and things that I want to include in that, and I think it could be fun to explore one day. But yeah, anyways, those are my romance ideas that I have in my head. Now, moving into fantasy, which is where my heart lies, obviously. A spin-off and probably the biggest project that I have currently in my head, and that is going to be the next thing that I am actively working on, which if you guys have been around for a while and you've been following my writing journey, you know, Sage from this book, my little fun little green fiendling with a zest for adventure, she leaves at the end of this book, kind of a spoiler, but like she goes on her own adventure, basically. And the next series that I want to write in this world, in the world of Ravar, is her story. Now, her story is not cozy at all. It is the Far Horizons trilogy, which is going to be epic fantasy, dark. There's going to be D&D vibes. It's very not cozy, not at all cozy. And I'm very excited to try this and get into it and all that kind of stuff. And I have a mood board, which I'm going to pop up here, but I wanted to read the tagline off of it, which I have it as my background on my computer. Hold on. The tagline is, a group of wannabe heroes find a job they're woefully unprepared for, one where the dead don't rest peacefully. Far Horizons trilogy. And it follows our characters Sage, Lara, Drift, Xantar, and Ku, our little D&D party, if you will. It's got nautical vibes. It has undead necromantic vibes. The first book is a fantasy mystery, and I really want to get back into writing it. My goal this year, if you saw my writing goal video, is to have not only draft 1 done of that book, but also draft 2 done of that book. And then a stretch goal is to have it ready for querying, because yes, this is the book that I want to try and query and get a traditional publishing deal with, which I think is going to be really interesting to try and do. But also, if nothing comes of it, I can publish this myself. I have the wherewithal. I did that 4 times, okay? Like I've done it many times, so I can do it myself, but I want to see if I could get this picked up traditionally and go through that whole process, because I really want to learn about the traditional publishing process and all that kind of stuff, and get in with a publishing house and have an agent and an editor and all that kind of stuff. So anyways, that is the plan for that. Far Horizons is the book series that I'm going to be working on. Dark, necromantic, interesting. I'll read you a little bit of my really shitty query if I can find it. It is -40 out today with the wind chill, and everything is acting extremely slow today because of it. My query letter that I wrote, and I did a video last year where I worked with someone in the industry to like make my query letter even better and get like advice from her and all this kind of stuff. So what I believe this is what I sent her. I am so excited to submit Far Horizons, a 120,000 word fantasy standalone with series potential, because you never want to query a series. It's always a standalone with series potential for your consideration. It is a fantasy mystery in the vein of Empire of Exiles by Aaron M. Evans, with an extra dose of Bloody Rose by Nicholas Eames's queer epic adventure. And then the query lady also said that it was good to probably add in like the found family aspect of like Legends and Lattes or something, like to give that extra added layer of maybe something a little bit more popular for query comps. Anyways, and then I have like an agent personalization that I would like to do once I like actually start researching and going through this. Here's the synopsis. All her life, Sage Tealeaf dreamed of becoming a bona fide hero, leaving her seaside town, mastering her druidic powers, and living out the adventures of her favorite novels. When she joins the adventuring band, The Crew, she thinks her wishes are coming true. That is, until they find themselves stranded on a tiny island in the middle of the Caspasian Sea with no gold to their names. Plus, Sage is worried The Crew is going to cut her loose for being inadequate, as her magic is proving considerably tougher to grasp than she anticipated. When the island turns out to be a pirating village plagued by an unknown creature stealing livestock, The Crew offers their services for a hefty sum, of course. But this seemingly simple job turns out to be substantially more sinister, as investigations uncover the creature is only an undead puppet for a much more malicious being. As townsfolk start to go missing and undead haunt the village, Sage and her team members battle villagers' panic, internal strife between one another, and the necromancer weaving soul strings to act on a grudge decades long. As tensions and undead rise, Sage has to prove herself and her abilities to the crew and save the pirating village before it is emptied of living souls. I love that line. Before it is emptied of living souls. Anyways, so yeah, that is most of the query. I won't read you the rest of it. So it is Sage's story. It is epic. It is adventure. It's D&D inspired. The first one is very fantasy mystery, like they're trying to figure out what's going on. And then from there, it's going to be very explosive and big. And I have plans for book 2 and 3. So that is definitely the most thought out fantasy idea that I have, obviously, because I have like an entire plot plotted out for that and like 30,000 words, 25,000 words in a draft somewhere. But anyways, that is Sage's story. Last year, I also plotted out 2 new story ideas that I did on video for you guys, which ended up being Project Glass is what I've called one of them, and then Project Mummy is what I've called the other. Project Glass is probably the next one in the lineup that I am most excited about and I think is the most commercial. So if nothing really goes on with Far Horizons, I'm definitely going to try with Project Glass because, as I said, it's the most marketable. And right now, the world is we're living in a dystopia. So anyways, this was originally inspired by Gideon the Ninth, like Gideon and Harrow's relationship, like the tension there. Vicious by V.E. Schwab, the tension between those two, and a yearning to have a better Fable for the End of the World by Ava Reid. But it has completely spun off from that and become its entirely own thing. So what really, really got this going was the fact that I was reading The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon and that entire series that's out at the same time as I was plotting this. And so it is dystopic. It is dark as fuck. And we have 2 characters, we have Ashlyn and Rose, who are at the main part of this, that are dealing with the fallout from a terrible event that's happened that is essentially the destruction of many different areas of life due to this experiment that these scientists were doing, all sorts of stuff. It's going to be, you know, an examination of power and terrible things that are happening and what's happening with the folks in the States right now with all the ICE people. It's a little similar to what I was plotting and I'm a little scared about it, but I'm a lot scared about it. I don't know what to say. Anyways, if you want to know more about Project Glass, definitely go watch that video. I will leave it linked down below along with Project Mummy. But this one hasn't really changed that much since that video. Project Mummy very much has. In my head anyways. I haven't done a lot of work specifically on it, but Project Mummy is a romantasy. It is going to be something that is a direct reflection of my love of The Mummy with Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz. I love the relationship dynamics between our 2 characters, Rick and Evie. So what this book started as was like a direct pull, beat by beat, from The Mummy. And after one of my friends reached out and was like, hey, you gotta worry about, like, be careful with, like, colonialism and all this kind of stuff that's happening, it has kind of tweaked a little bit in my head into something more along the lines of, like, they're studying the history of their worlds, of their town, their area that they're in, and this figure from that it is almost a mythological figure of this woman who is rumored to be the birth of, or like the birthplace of the magic in their world. Like it's gonna be a similar like adventure going into caves and finding out magic and all this kind of stuff, and it's gonna be a lot of secrets and stuff like that, but it's gonna play a lot on the magic system and how in the world that our 2 characters, Flo and Isaac, are living in right now, there's very little magic in their world, but the deeper they go into these caverns, the more magic they uncover. And I really like to play in this world, like, because the magic system to me is like, it's very linguistic based. The fact that I have to create an entire system of magic that's linguistic based, I hate my brain for that, but like that's gonna be so cool. You know what I mean? So it's going to be very much the Mummy vibes, but more based in my own world with my own creatures and my own magic system. And like they're going to be discovering magic and all this kind of stuff and these curses and what happened way back in the day when this woman was betrayed and like all this sorts of stuff. So I'm so excited to get into this. If you want to know more, a little bit about more of the lore and stuff like that, and the heart of this story, go watch that video as well. But this one definitely has changed the most since I uploaded that video. In my head, I haven't actually done the work for it, but I'm so excited to potentially dive into that one. And I've also like, I want to go full romantasy with this, like sexy, you know what I mean? Like I want to lean into that with this book, which I think would be really, really fun. This one is definitely going to be like a one-off. I don't know if Project Glass will be a one-off. I'm thinking that one would probably be a duology. Maybe a trilogy, depending on how much story I can milk from it. But Project Mummy is probably going to just be a one-off, a standalone type situation. So, I mean, who knows? When I actually get into the plotting of things change. But that is the plan anyways right now. So yes, we have Project Glass, which is a dystopian. We have Project Mummy, which is a romantasy. And we have Project the Far Horizons trilogy, which is an epic fantasy. And the first one is a fantasy mystery, and the rest of them are more like a traditional quest, heroic situation, horror-y vibes as well. On top of that, I do have other ideas that have either been in my head for a really long time or are just like little things that have been just like itching at my brain. One of them is a cozy fantasy that came into my brain after I read Green Teeth by Molly O'Neill. And it is set in like an adjacent world to Aramount, which is what this whole series is. But in A Favorite Fae, we have Mary, who is Fae. She's from the Fae realm. And we are dealing with Fae creatures, and we meet her mom and her grandma, who are from the Fae realm and all this kind of stuff. And we meet little Faes in here. And I would really like to go into the Fae realm and do a cozy in there. Very heavily inspired by Green Teeth. So like maybe even cozy adjacent, because I want more teeth. I want more horror elements in there, because I just think there's something so fascinating about the intersection of horror and fantasy and also cozy. Like there's something so fascinating about that intersection. I don't know what it is, because you never really think horror could be cozy, and yet there's a lot of books out there that are genuinely like cozy horror books, which is crazy. Anyway, so that one I have deemed Tread Lightly in my head. That is the very basic working title. Cozy adjacent standalone story. Like it is, I have a couple characters, I have an idea that I'm going to play with. I wrote originally 3 Fae creatures trying to track down Excalibur. It starts in Fae Cross, pick up a human who's a failed wizard. The Fae end up giving them magic. The Serpentine Kefithnath, which is a creature that you meet in A Favorite Fae during his travels in the Fae realm. And then there's a Keeper Without a Home, who you also meet in A Favorite Fae. And then, you know, like little things like that. Like I have 4 characters. I have the Kefithnath, which is a creature, a wanderer seeking purpose. We have the Keeper Without a Home, a wanderer fleeing grief. We have a hermit, a wanderer seeking comfort. And then we have the human, the wanderer seeking power to prove themselves. So it's this found family quest in the Fae realm, but there's gonna be a lot of heart at the center of it. Yes, it's also the Fae realm, so it's gonna be fucking weird and creepy. And I wrote down Excalibur because I love Arthurian mythology, and Green Teeth is very heavily inspired by Arthurian mythology. It probably won't be Excalibur, obviously, because that's not, Excalibur and King Arthur don't have a place in my fantasy world that I've created. But it'll be something along those lines, and it'll be like this little quest of like a human picked up something they shouldn't have, and thus they have to be, you know, babysat by all these Fae people in the Fae realm, because humans in the Fae realm is a bad idea. So I'm excited to kind of explore that one a little bit more. Tread Lightly, that's that one. I don't think I've ever shared that title anywhere, so there you go. Project Tread Lightly. There's that one. And I also have a cozy sci-fi in my head that originally was inspired by Phineas, his song 2001. Let me pull up the lyrics, because the lyrics are really what it did for me. Like the literally the opening line: stuck waiting for you on the dark side of the moon with an unbeatable view at a table for 2. And then it's this conversation of like, yeah, it's based on 2001 Space Odyssey. Yeah. But it's like this conversation between these two, between the singer and the speaker and this person that just keeps running away from them. And in my head, I was like, oh, bounty hunter. Like that would be so fun if it was 2 bounty hunters that come to the same spot on the moon regularly to like catch up or something. And then they get caught up in some kind of weird, kooky little space adventure. And then I was watching Distractable because I love that podcast so much with Markiplier and Bob and Wade, his two friends. There was one episode where they talked about the color that NASA has deemed the color of like the universe or something. Like it's the color of something space related that they gave a name to. Like literally the world. The NASA gave an official name to this and it's called Cosmic Latte. And my head was like, oh my God, that's the title. Because I was like, what if it's this cutie little, like, they always come to this same cafe situation on the moon, or like some random, like, it'll probably, once I world build to this universe, right, and I dive into sci-fi and all that kind of stuff, that's going to be a crazy ride to actually dive into sci-fi. But like, what if they come back to this place on this planet regularly, and it's these two bounty hunters doing something, and like we also have a third character that it maybe is our main character. I'm not sure how I'm going to do that. I have not given this much thought. But I have this idea of like they come back to this cafe called Cosmic Latte, and then they get caught up with like a story, like with something that has to do with the owner of the place or a worker there or something. Like they just get caught up in this crazy shenanigan filled space cozy book that I think would be so fun, along the lines of like, I was about to say Catherine Valente. No, Valerie Valdez's like Chilling Effect. Like I love the antics of that book, but like more cozy instead of more actiony. That's the idea anyways. I thought that was very fun. Something that my mind can probably play with a little later this year. But those are the two cozies that I have. Actually, I do have a third one. I have a third one that I totally have not done any work on, but it was a little inspiration nugget of an idea. That's what this video is, just ideas. Doesn't necessarily need to be all fleshed out. I have a little nugget of an idea inspired by the fact that when I finished the Aragon series, I was ranting to Lindsay, my friend here, Lindsay Bucket, about the ending that Aragon chooses for himself. If you've read that series, you know what I mean. I went, what if instead I write a cozy novel with dragons, and it's this kind of almost like How to Lose a Time War through letters, the majority of it, where it's these two people who used to be in love and they like slowly have to come back together for some reason. It's like this, you know, reclusive guy way far away with his dragons, and he doesn't really know how to deal with society anymore. And then it's her coming in, basically asking for his help. Like I have a couple ideas on that. I haven't actually like delved into it, but that's another thing. But speaking of dragons, we're going to talk about one of the longest running stories that I've had in my head. Oh my God. We're going back to the beginning of this channel because I started this channel in 2019. And at the time I was working on something called Project Dark, which has been shelved. It is a YA, I don't even know, fantasy something that I have since like purged characters out of. One of whom is Rose, who I mentioned in Project Glass's whole situation. She's going to be used in that one instead, which I think is going to be such a better spot for her. But around that time, I started creating my world of Ravar. And if you have read my books, you know I have a map at the beginning of my books, and it is the realm of Ravar, blah, 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 blah. I created this realm of Ravar here on this page, wherein I basically created it to, one, start telling fantasy stories in a completed realm, and also I started playing D&D with my friends in that realm. Like it's a very fleshed out type situation. I should have kept the map up. But a lot of what goes on in the cozies and all that kind of stuff are down here, because we have Aramount right there at the tip of this little peak here, down here in the Brenham Empire. And then Sage's story is going to be in the Caspasian Isles down here a little bit more. And then a lot of my D&D we played went this way in the island a little bit, which was really cool, into the Black Shell Forest and stuff like that. Freya's having way too much fun today. And then I have a story in my head that I like to call Project Dragon. And that is what I have called my soul book for a really long time. I don't necessarily know if it's still that, but it is a book that was like the heart of the story is something that I've been wanting to write for well over a decade. Like it is, I love How to Train Your Dragon. That is my favorite animated movie ever. And I wanted to write a dragon story like that. Not like that, but I wanted to write a dragon story that didn't have people killing dragons or whatever. Like I wanted it to be like Dragon Keepers vibes. So I started planning something like that because I got the idea after reading Hannah Long's Hall of Smoke for the very first time. It's one of these books right here of like northern Viking, very isolated, mountainous, interesting vibes. And thus became the Nerian Empire up here. And then I have the Aderlin Peaks, and over yonder we have Ardnablan right here, which is my Freya's now eating food. She's crunching away. She's just being the most disruptive today. Ardnablan is the dragon sanctuary up in the Nerian Empire. And I have this idea of the dragon sanctuary, obviously, where my main character Maeve lives, and she unearthed a really old notebook for this. And she is just this kind of reclusive dragon trainer type situation. It is such an epic, dark fantasy book. It's called God Touched in my head. That is the title of the first book. It's going to be a duology in my head anyways. Not only do we have Maeve and her dragon sanctuary, we also have Isolde, who is a little seer girl who lives in a city in the Nerian Empire, who is part blind due to her seeing abilities. And she is like 9 years old, maybe, and she's taken advantage of a lot because of her abilities. And she sets something in motion because the wrong person hears one of her prophecies. And there's also gods in this story. A lot of the gods that you will hear mentioned in my Aramount books are the new gods. So they're very inspired by the Forgotten Realm gods in D&D, but we have like the newer gods and situation in that book. In the Nerian Empire, they worship the old gods. And the old gods are a little weird. Because I love a little weird. I love a god. One of my favorite things is a relationship between a main character and a god. Like the fact, like honestly, one of the biggest things in Hall of Smoke by Hannah Long that really inspired me was the battle of like godliness that was going on in here, and our main character is a priestess of a god and all this kind of stuff. Like I love playing with the ideas of mortals and gods and like getting caught up in a god's situation, because gods are just such interesting things to work with. So that is one of my favorite tropes, and that is going to be played with in God Touched. We also have the trope of the fallen kingdom and the lost royal, or the hidden royal. I love that trope. We have a character in this book named Ira who is from a kingdom that is destroyed by a cult that is led by this guy who has a tie with one of the gods, because in this story, a few people start getting touched by gods in different ways, hence the title God Touched, where they start getting more powerful. Isolde, my little seer girl, she has a direct link to the goddess of like foresight and whatever. Like she has this ability because the goddess decided to reach down and like poke her in the eye or something. Like she just like this book, I don't know if it's going to be set at the same time as my Aramount books or like further in the future, because the gods are changing in this book specifically. It's probably going to be definitely further in the future, because the stuff that's going on in Sage's book also has to do with gods at some point. So like I love gods, if you couldn't tell. And it's going to be like the new gods on her side. These are the old gods. So it's going to be so interesting to play with. But this is definitely going to be a little bit more in the future, because the world is a little bit more industrial at this point and dirty, and Isolde's world is like a really Victorian level London. Like it's dirty and messy, and she's cold all the time, and it's like a really shitty place. Like, listen, if you love my cozies, these are going to be kind of a slap in the face, these books that are coming out, or like that I eventually write, because holy shit, do I live in a world where my brain wants nothing more than to just dark. I don't know what happened when I went into my cozies, and like that little area of my life became so cozy and happy and wonderful and heartwarming. But like, no, I like ripping apart characters' lives, and I'm excited to do that with my next few books, because I haven't done that in a number of years. So like all that dark brewing shit is still in me somewhere. But so God Touch is going to be very interesting, because it's going to be dealing with all these different godly beings breaking rules that they set out for themselves and reaching through to the material realm and having a direct influence on people. And then it's these people doing shit. And so our main character, Maeve, she is God Touched. She's going to become God Touched at some point in the first book. I remember writing that scene, and I still have that scene in my head. And it's fucking bananas. Like, it's one of my favorite scenes that I've ever written. Like, the whole, like, the sequence. Because I'll just tell you now, because who knows if it's going to be the same. And who knows when this book is going to ever come out. But this sequence is she gets on the back of one of her dragons. Her dragon is named Indes. One of the dragons at the keeper thing is not her dragon. Her dragon is called something entirely different. But the dragon that she gets on the back of is a purple dragon named Indes. And Ira also goes with her. And Maeve and Ira are going to be a thing. Sapphic vibes. But not at this moment. Maeve is a little bit more closed off. She's definitely neurodivergent. She's very she doesn't like talking to people, but dragons are easy to talk to. And they go to the Nerian capital where they talk to the queens there because they have a contact with the queens. But it's very in the dark at night because in this world, people still hunt dragons sometimes. Nerian Empire less so because the Nerian Empire actually worships dragons in a different way. So they're a little bit more of a religious being. But anyone below the Nerian Empire into the Brenham Empire and the Manon Empire, they hunt dragons because they're just creatures. But to the Nerian Empire, they are magical beings, all this kind of stuff, right? Revered. They're the daughters of this one goddess. So Maeve and Ira are going to the castle to give a little, this is what's happening. We found this we found a downed dragon and an adventurer from the Brennan Empire who tried to kill her. This is what's going on. There's also something happening with the dragon scale trade, all this sorts of stuff. Lots of lore. I haven't thought about this story in a long time. It's all just coming up right now. But they go to the castle and then an attack happens at the castle by this cult. And yet they don't know that this cult is an issue yet. It's very in the background. It's very boiling up and throughout this whole book. It's very epic, very, it's going to span a number of days, months, It's going to be the coming up of this cult kind of situation. And this cult is around one of the old gods that is a little bit bad, a little bit more evil leaning than neutral or good, if you were to go with the traditional chaotic whatever scale. So they leave on the back of Indes, the two, Maeve and Ira, but then they get shunted through a portal because one of the queens can do magic. She's a wizard or whatever. She sends them through the portal to try and get them home, but something goes a little funky because when they start thinking of home, Ira doesn't think of the dragon sanctuary. She thinks of home, where she was sent. So something goes wrong, wires are crossed. They end up in the middle of the Black Shell fucking forest at this point, high north Black Shell forest. The dragon, they end up falling off the dragon's back. It's this whole situation. Ira has magic. She can save herself, and she kind of does save Maeve as well. Maeve doesn't really have magic at this point, but Maeve, her head splits open. It's this she cracks her head against a tree as she's falling. It's a mortal wound, right? It should have killed her. But then it's this big moment of the god that's been trying to get through to her gets through to her and saves her. And it's this whole thing of on the side of her head where this big scar is where she, smashed her head into a tree and Ira's trying to save her and all this kind of stuff. There's the imprint of a god's hand right there. And so there's different ways that you can see that people are God touched. And hers is that there's an imprint of a god's hand on her head. That's it's holding that together. It basically seals that together. It is one of the coolest things I've ever thought up in my entire life. That whole sequence, I love it so much. So we have her, who's God touched. We have Isolde, of course, my little seer girl, who's God touched, and you can see it because her eye is white. That's her mark of being God touched. And there's a couple other people who are going to be God touched that come into the story. One of them is going to be the cult leader because he's God touched by that motherfucker. And he's known as the bear throughout Isolde's entire storyline because she doesn't pick up names. She just kind of gives people names because also people, when you have a 9-year-old around, a lot of people at this point just shunt her around. They don't introduce themselves. They just kind of take her and don't really even get to know her. She's just a pawn. She's a tool. So she gives people names in her head because how else is she gonna refer to them? She refers to him as the bear because he's huge. And he has, his God touch symbol is actually not visible because he is stabbed through the heart and a god offers him, that god basically offers him his life back if he does all this stuff. And then there's a handprint right here from where he was stabbed. That's his God touched mark. Anyways, I've been yabbing about that book forever. I really need to get back to that book because that is making me very excited. But yes, so that is Project Dragon. Project Dragon is epic. It deals with gods. We got so many different point of views. It's gonna be chunky. This is definitely gonna be a fantasy book that I end up working on once I am more versed in fantasy. Again, I'm gonna definitely go back to it at some point, probably after doing Sage's story. I wanna be more of an expert in my craft when I go back to that one because I wanna do that one justice. And I know that one's gonna be long as fuck. I'm gonna need to be in the publishing world at that point because I'm gonna need to try and convince my editors and my agent to let me publish it because they're probably not gonna wanna publish a book that long because, word counts. Anyways, so that that's God Touched. That's gonna be 2 books, God Touched, and I don't remember what I decided to make the second one. I think it was Fate Touched, maybe? I don't know. I don't remember. Anyways, so there's that. I have so many other stories that are just knocking around in my head. I'm like really digging through my thoughts right now. Oh, no, there is. In here, we have, of course, there's also the one book that I mentioned when I was going to do Project Glass and Project Mummy. There was a third one that I called Project Ghost. If you watched that original first video, Project Glass, I talked about that one. And I didn't end up plotting it because it kind of fell out in my head. Like I wasn't as interested in it anymore. That one was inspired by the song Good Girls, and it was a thriller with a little touch of paranormal that I was gonna investigate in, because I can't write anything without a touch of fucking magic, you know? Like it just doesn't make me happy. And even like Merry and Bright, which is a completely contemporary book, it's Christmas. So it's got Christmas magic, you know what I mean? Like it's not actually magic, but like it's got that magic to it, and that's why I was okay to write it. But everything I need to write has a little bit of magic or something going on. So this one has ghosts. It's about a girl who was a victim of a serial killer, but she was the only one who got out and her best friend did not. It's her, she became like the face of the crime, because she was very, like, she became prettier after the fact. Like, she was very plain Jane, she was just like a typical white girl, you know? Very plain Jane. She wasn't very noticeable, and she wasn't the serial killer's type. Her best friend was. And she was with her best friend when they were taken. So she was not supposed to be there. And like this whole thing, she gets freed, and she also turns in the serial killer. But she has so much guilt around this thing because she believes herself to be the reason that her friend is dead. And this whole like crime comes back in some kind of way. Like it's there's something going on. Like it's either a copycat or someone's trying to get back at her or something. I haven't thought that far through, but she's being haunted by these girls that the serial killer killed. She's trying not to hear them because like she is so guilt-ridden about it. There's a lyric in that song, Good Girls, that inspired that whole thing. Let me see if I can find it actually. So the beginning is, street light, pick a fight with a stranger. I've been saving up my anger, stacking up like pennies in my pocket, whistle like a runaway train, and I lost it. And that whole sentence is just like, it immediately put this picture in my head of this kind of like dusty sepia toned town, like where this would have happened. And then the refrain that keeps coming back is, good girls die young, don't you know they got 'em, all lined up with names on their coffins. Mary Beth died with stars in her eyes. I've been running from her ghost all my life. And then it's the refrain that keeps coming back is I hear them crying, good girls, I hear them crying. So it's just like that particular line really got me. It's that the all lined up with names on their coffins. So it's like once the girls were found, once all their bodies were discovered, and they had like a massive funeral and they were all lined up with names on their coffins. And then Mary Beth, whoever that ends up being, is the main character's best friend, died with stars in her eyes because of the reasons that she died. Anyways, it's also going to be a little bit of sapphic. Who's to say? I haven't touched that one in a really long time. I also have another cozy crime idea that was inspired by Enola Holmes. I was watching it, I think with my friend Sophia, and Sophia was like, man, I wish there was like an adult romance like this with this like dynamic. And I was like, I could write that. So that was the idea originally. And then I pulled out this old book of mine that I at one point wrote in for ideas, and at some point in this book there is a stack of sticky notes and the story. And originally the main character in this was named Flo, but I took that name for my other character, so I gotta find a different one. But this was definitely like Jack the Ripper, Victorian times, like when Enola Holmes is set, where we have our main character who is our like wannabe detective kind of a thing, and she gets herself wrapped up in this case because her sister goes missing. Her sister is taken away. And I got really inspired by a crime that I looked up because I was like, what if this was inspired by an actual thing that happened? And I looked up the crime. Like there was a bunch of different things that were going on, but the Bluebeard of Gambles crime in 1919 just fucking set something on fire in my head. It was a man who would take people away, like take a woman away from her town and like would kill them, and I don't know. Like there's a lot of speculation and stuff like that, so I started writing down like what happened. So Mary Lacoste was the younger sister of Céline Buisson, suspected this man, his name was Landru. They knew him as Freinet because he would change his name. Thought he was a marriage swindler out to get his hands on her sister's money. The siblings were barely on speaking terms because of these suspicions. Landru was worried Lacoste was sus of her sister's murder because he took her away and she was never seen again. So he sent fake postcards in her name, in the sister's name, to like pretend that just she was still alive kind of a thing. So like he killed her and was worried that the sister knew or was on to him or stuff like that. So like I took heavy inspiration on the fact that it's this man who like took the sister away. Like he did this with a lot of women apparently. Like he was like in romantic correspondence with a bunch of people, but he did this with a couple women, or like he would take them away from their families and then they would never see them again. And I was like, that's interesting, because also like in this time, I'm losing my voice a little bit. In this time, there weren't phones, you know, or like cell phones where you could like, you know, track someone's place. So like in the Victorian era, people go missing and then it's just assumed that, you know, she's just living her married life or whatever. Like we just haven't heard from her in a while because the letters or whatever. And then the postcards were coming. So they're like, no, we are hearing from her because all this stuff. But the sister's suspicious. She thinks that something's gone wrong and her sister's missing and blah, blah, blah. That was kind of the nut of this. And then I wanted a romance in this, like from Enola Holmes. Really, what you can see from all of my ideas and all things like that, I get very inspired by different things. I get inspired by songs, I get inspired by movies, I get, you know, all this kind of stuff. The final idea I'm going to talk about, it is a middle grade. I have not thought, actually, no, I think about my babies all the time. Regularly, I think about them, which is so funny, but I haven't thought about this story or picking up this story in a while. And that is Abby Carter and the Dreamlings. This one here is 74,100 words. This is a middle grade, way too long, that I thought up. I had the idea for it. It was like just a little burst of an idea. It happens a lot where I just have like a little burst of an idea and then I just kept spinning it. And this whole idea of these kids who live in a small town where the forest nearby also has like a pocket world in it, and this pocket world is in danger. And this girl, our main character, starts seeing these creatures that are weird dream creatures, and she starts walking in this forest in her dreams. And it's like the beginning of the story is like nightmarish, like the forest doesn't want them there, it's trying to keep them out, all this kind of stuff. But then she ends up slipping through in her like dream realm, and like the people there that are like the keepers of this tree and the magic there are like, we need help because something is happening and winter is encroaching too quickly. Like people are messing with ley lines, people are messing with all this kind of stuff. Yeah, ley lines are coming back. Yeah, I did talk about that in a favorite fae. That was the whole thing. Like you'll see a lot of the same touches in a lot of stories that I have, but this was a cutie little middle grade. It was like, you know, dream magic. It was a big found family, big cast of characters. Like I had balls when I wrote this story because there are 7 characters that are all part of this. And one of my greatest delights is having, this is at the time I was doing this one, I had a couple critique partners and stuff because I did actually query this. I tried to get an agent with this story. It died on query. It never went anywhere. But one day I would like to revisit it maybe. I think that would be really fun to write middle grade books because it's such a fun, wonderful age range to play with things. Because kids are just so fun. I had critique partners at the time that I sent this to, and one of the critique partners I had came back and he was a dad to a kid about the same age as Abby is in this. He came back and one of the things was like, he's like, I thought there was gonna be way too many characters when you started introducing them, but you were able to balance them so well and you were able to get the voice of kids across so well. And I was like, oh damn, that is so nice. Like that is such a good compliment because I work with kids. I teach kids piano regularly. So I know their mannerisms. I know the way they talk. I know the way that they become like so self-centered, and yet they do care so deeply about the people that they love. Like kids are so interesting, right? And like I had such a big cast in this book and they all had their own little mannerisms and way of talking, and the people who read this book said that they could easily keep them apart and they thought each of the characters were so wonderful. Like one of the people were like, you should probably cut it down, but I wouldn't you probably make the cast smaller, but I don't know how you would because they're all so wonderful and like integral to the plot in different ways. That was a lovely little compliment. But one day I will revisit Abby Carter and the Dreamlings because this is a whole series that I had plotted out in my head, and I will probably revisit that in some capacity. Anyways, my voice is going because I've been yapping for way too long. If you voted for like 50 minutes, you're correct because this video is probably going to be so long. But I hope you enjoyed listening to me just yap about all the story ideas I have. Let me know down below what you're most excited about, or like what piqued your interest, or what you want to hear more about, or if you have any more questions about things, because I probably didn't explain a lot of them very well. But hey, this is how my brain works. This is just how many ideas I have. And that, like, these are the ideas that kind of have legs. I could tell you about that one idea that I had of a girl picking up a lucky penny and that being a romance book. Like, I could tell you about, you know, just all sorts of shit that I have ideas for that are literally just like one sentence ideas, and those don't have legs. Like, they don't have a space in my brain. They're just something that I thought up at one point in my life and thought maybe that'd be a cool book. But you know what, that's really where all these books started, is just a tiny idea that then connected with another tiny idea and then spiraled out into actual books. And the 800 different notebooks that I have, or, you know, the manuscripts that I've written, and, you know, all that kind of stuff. But anyways, my friends, I'm gonna leave this here. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you in another one very soon. Stay kind and keep on reading.